I want to speak to you about a new organization called the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. I'm here because we are in the midst of a potentially monumental ecological crisis. It is only through a new environmentalism 2.0 that progress can be made. We believe that our only hope for human advancement and even human survival is through the exponential advance of science in the service of humanity. We stand firmly against the war on science that is predicated on the appeal to nature fallacy, which is the belief that whatever is natural must be good and whatever is unnatural must be bad. This belief has become an impediment to advances in areas such as human health, social progress, and even environmental progress. In the field of medicine, the appeal to nature fallacy has already led to catastrophic outcomes. Resistance to vaccines threatens public health and the lives of children. The unwarranted resistance to GMOs has not only held back the fight against climate change, but it has also hampered our ability to feed the developing world as well. Campaigns against GMOs have also held back efforts to ward off the deadly Aedes aegypti mosquito, which has killed countless millions as a carrier of disease and plagues. The scientific consensus concerning the safety of GMOs is solidly supported in every major scientific organization across the planet. The only thing green about being anti-GMO is the extra cash that is made by overcharging for expensive boutique food. But that won't cut it when it comes to raising crops with accelerating heat stress, droughts, floods, disease, and insect infestations brought on by a hotter planet. It makes no sense to accept the call of the IPCC for decarbonization within the next 12 years and yet reject their conclusion that these goals are impossible without nuclear power, which has proven itself to be the cleanest, safest, and most reliable way of achieving decarbonization. It is the most reliable way to decarbonize simply because the alternatives of weather-dependent power sources are inherently unreliable. And nuclear is the cleanest energy source because it is the only form of energy production that completely encases its waste stream. Super safe, advanced Generation 4 reactors, which will almost completely convert existing nuclear waste to centuries worth of energy, are coming very close to commercialization. In fact, it goes completely against most everything we're led to believe. But nuclear is legitimately the safest form of energy generation according to all the accepted worldwide energy fatality data. But there is one thing that nuclear is not safe for, and that is the fossil fuel industry. The fact of the matter is that the fossil fuel industry has a long history of funding the anti-nuclear movement, along with climate change deniers, to protect their bottom line. Solid science is in dire need of a champion. And that is what eco-modernism is all about. Eco-modernism is a new environmental paradigm which looks to reverse the fear of nuclear power and scientific progress in general. Ecology-based modernism is the most direct way to define it. Eco-modernism as a philosophy is described in the Eco-Modernist Manifesto. We believe humanity should not be rejecting technological progress, but rather separate our impacts from nature through the responsible use of technology and urbanization. Urbanization is an unstoppable worldwide trend and the best solution to many environmental problems. It offers sustainable development for the human population and is a historic antidote to both deforestation and species extinction as humans move away from using wildlife as their protein source. Vertical, urban, high-rise architecture minimizes the use of land, resources, and energy, enabling walkable cities that facilitates the more efficient use of mass public transit as well. It must be emphasized that our support for technological solutions is definitely not about defending industrial polluters, nor do we accept funding from corporations or industry. Nor does our defense of technology imply that we just need to sit back and let things take care of themselves. To the contrary, we believe that humanity is at a crossroads that severely threatens our future on this planet. We reject the idea of resource limits on many levels. The advance of science has a long history of getting around problems of resource scarcity and will continue to do so. Another reason is that Earth is just one of a multitude of worlds available to explore in our solar system and beyond. Comets and asteroids are untapped reservoirs for raw materials. If we could find a way to thrive in artificial ecosystems off-world, we could use what we learn to help sustain terrestrial ecosystems here on Earth. I hope by now you understand the worthiness of our cause. Ecomodernism is really only a philosophy at this time. I want to talk to you about the necessity of turning it into a movement, which will be part of the larger environmentalist movement. For it is only through our presence and participation that there can be any hope of moving environmentalism in the right direction. Our aim is not to divide the environmental movement, but rather to multiply its numbers with the incorporation of many scientific and educational communities that is working to both build chapters of eco-modernist societies and support our growth worldwide. We aspire to increase our numbers by bringing together the numerous supporters of climate action that have been alienated by mainstream environmentalism's wildly contradictory support for the shutting down of nuclear power plants in the midst of a climate emergency, and welcome them into our ranks. Thank you.
Please subscribe to us on YouTube, EcoModern channel. Also to subscribe to us on Twitter and Facebook, EcoModern Society of North America.
Children, what is your name? Do you want to go fishing? Do you want to play? Heading at the sun today, they say, just to feel the rain. Heading out at noon today, they say, on a 3-day sail. Hey there, little children, what is your name? Let's all go fishing. Let's all go and play. Heading out at noon today, they say, on a 3-day sail. Heading out into the sun today, just to feel the rain.
I want to speak to you about a new organization.
On another planet with 29 moons, there is a spirit like me and you, stretching across the
We need the recording.
Yeah, we do.
If need be, if you can't do one or the other, just do the live show, and we could do a short one, and we'll set up another day. You want to do that? Download it. So that ain't a problem.
Cool.
Download it. So that ain't a problem.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello and welcome to the program. I hope we'll stay live this time. I'm having some unexpected instability here. Let's see what if pardon folks, I'm just gonna double check, do some live production work and make sure that we don't have like 8 different streams on the channel. That would be unfortunate. Okay. Looks fine. All right. From the top.
Why don't you start it again? Start again.
No. Hello
Yeah.
and welcome to the Eco-Modernist channel live. My name is Carl Pauls. I'm here with Gabe Bignetti, Chris Bergen, and Ed Bourgeois. We expect to have Dr. Kevin Folta on as well a little bit later. Ed Bourgeois has over 50 years experience in farming and food systems innovation advancement, local to global. And we are here, of course, to talk about sustainable agriculture. Kevin Folta is a prominent science communicator and professor of the Horticultural Sciences Department at the University of Florida. And I hope we see Ed, because this will be a great discussion, I hope. Ed, what can you tell us about regenerative agriculture? What is it? Why does it matter?
Yeah, regenerative agriculture is sort of the recent version of, for probably about since the late 1960s, early 70s, when ChemAg became really strong, there was some drawbacks to it. Of course, we had the Dust Bowl. We had a lot of deterioration of our soils, a lot of dependencies on the chemicals and the costs of them, concerns that some people had with our consumers that we just couldn't necessarily say yes or no as far as qualities. And also I noticed that our what we grew just wasn't tasting as good as it had in the past. So we started to look at, pre-World War II, sort of the work that had been done in studying what soil was. 1940, Hans Jenny determined the difference between dirt and soil, the sand, silt, and the clay, and the organic and detritus, the organic matter, and the microbes in the soil and their role. And so we started to change our practices, starting with, in the United States, we were grazing had turned into you just put all the animals out in the field and they just ate it all down, and then we got more parasites in crop production, a lot of tillage, a lot of chemicals. Our soils were eroding, we're losing out a lot of topsoil again, just like the Dust Bowl, dust storms, polluting waterways, really dependent on more and more synthetic fertilizers, more and more chemicals. And so we started to look at, and it had been all based basically on dirt and chemistry. And we thought, what is the role of biology? Something that we could maybe in the future start studying more. And maybe we would have the technology in the future beyond just maybe a simple microscope look. And so we just started looking at practices. Early days in this early 70s, people started, a few farmers. This was a farmer-led movement, pretty much. Started reducing their tillage, which definitely made some help. Cut down a lot on costs, a lot of erosion problems. Then started to think about cover crops, started to learn about the microbiology a bit and its function. So, and then back, about 25 years ago, we started, it was originally kind of talked about, soil health in general. We didn't want to brand it, but of course, everybody likes a brand, likes a name. So it sort of became sustainable, and the idea of could your farm self-sustain itself through natural processes. And then about 20 years ago or a little more, it became concept of regenerative, which was taking sustainable and really thinking about that deeper as far as what is the role that we could do in making our soil regenerate again and our taste of food regenerate and our ecosystems and our clean water and our water cycles, all those things sort of regenerating and really making farming sustainable into the future.
Wonderful. So is this at all related to organic farming? Are there different schools of thought when it comes to technique and qualification of regenerative agriculture?
We've tried not to fall into the way that organic went, where it was all or nothing, because we realized that for transition of farmers, we don't want to say you've all got to do all or nothing. It's just starting on a path of transition. All farms are different. We created what we call the 5 principles of soil health. And then we added context, which was just, least disturbance of the soil, whether it be through tillage or chemicals, trying to keep armor on the soil, in other words, detritus of plant, to keep it protected. So from erosion and sun and protect the microbes, plant diversity. And so that we realized that monocultures had problems. Plant diversity allowed the plants to send out the exudates, the foods to feed the microbe population. Incorporating livestock when possible. And living roots in the soil as much as possible through cover crops, because that keeps that microbial community fed. So, and then we added context, because the principles are universal, the principles of nature, no matter where you are in the world. But every farm, every culture, every economics has their own context. So that's the difference, and that's where we needed to be sensitive in transition to context. So there are some certification programs that regenerative can have. Often they're sort of tiered so that you don't have to be extreme. I mean, we want to have transparency as much as possible. We want to decentralize the food system so that as much as you can, your farmer, you have a way of finding out what they're doing and whether you're comfortable with what they're doing.
That's really great. I've heard a lot because I recently saw this. I saw this lecture with Dave Montgomery, and we talked backstage a bit. And I'm hearing a lot of refrain, a lot of the repeated terms, and there is a science background into this. And folks like David Montgomery are assisting in looking to producing the science and making a record of exactly how this is beneficial, and that's a good counterpoint to the chem agro system. And I hope we get Kevin Folta in here soon to have a good discussion. But Ed, from your perspective, is there a reform in the chem agro industry? Is it, or are they just trying to push a product as hard as possible?
I don't really want to speak much for the chem ag industry. One thing, we're really into science and regenerative, and often we're pseudoscience and considered or talked about by the status quo. But we're deeply into it. We're into metagenomics of the soil, understanding all the microbes and what they really do. We're into the metabolomics, really measuring what is the nutrition in the food? It's not so much about yield per acre, it's nutrition. You know, if you've got to eat 5 carrots to get the same nutrition as 1 carrot, that's a whole different story, whether it be in yield or cost to the consumer or many things. So, you know, even with seeds now, we're looking at seeds very differently. It's not just the DNA, it's not just genetically engineering a seed to have a certain trait. It's the biome of that seed, it's the nutrition that that seed has when it goes into the ground so that it can have a healthy start. Very much like we're looking at people now. You know, what is our health? Where does our health start? Is our biome, our nutrition? Do you have the right biome? Do you have the colostrum in you? So all those things are really important, and science is something that we lead in a lot of these areas. You know, we're looking at now we're looking at monitoring and testing of the soil health testing instead of just chemical testing. We now have a new meter that's been developed by farmers working with some researchers to actually in the field measure our mineral content in our plant and in our soil so that we can really produce that health so we don't need the pesticides. We've realized that through the work of Tom Dykstra in Florida, who's an entomologist, that we don't really need pesticides if our plants are healthy enough. And so we've been able to solve a lot of problems now without having to use sides. You know, we're understanding how do you get that plant healthy so that it resists the pests, because insects don't want to eat healthy plants. They can't. Otherwise, our planet would be devastated. Otherwise, the rainforest would be a 5-star restaurant and game would be over. Theirs is to consume the unhealthy and the dead. So if we can create health, we don't have that problem anymore.
Chris, go ahead. You have a question.
Yeah, my great grandpa who lived until I was in my 30s, but he had a feed company and supplied feed for various stocks in northeast Iowa. I believe back in the 1920s, he said he was among the first to add sugar to the feed pellets, which got chickens, pigs, and cows to eat more, which made them fatter, which isn't maybe the best way for nutrition, but eating more, I guess, fatten them up from his perspective. Is there a place for secondary foods like pellets and other additives to go along with regenerative, or do you feel that that's the job to restore the soil so that you don't need them at all?
Yeah, we just did. Again, we talking about the community, the regenerative community, just did a huge beef study. In other words, meat study for grazing animals, whether it be sheep or no matter what it is. And what we found is the most nutritious was animals that grazed on healthy plant diversity. Plant diversity was very important. And they had the best omega-6 to 3 fat ratio. Omega-6 is the fats like you get from seed oils, generally known to cause inflammation. It's something that we didn't have in our diet very strongly until recent times. Omega-3 are the more traditional fats from animals. Wild salmon is considered the kind of the gold standard of that ratio, which is 1-to-1. And so we found that when we graze on healthy pastures, they're rotated properly as they should be, with the diversity, that we get our meat down to about a 1-to-1, 2-to-1 ratio, where a lot of feedlot feeds, depending on what they're feeding again, the better that they're fed, and, are often anywhere from 8, 10, 20-to-1. which is going to be much less healthy. So, it's not that having some time in a feedlot fed the right things, because again, maybe because of context of an area or farm, is necessarily going to produce a product that isn't reasonable to eat. But at the extreme levels, we're finding that it's not very healthy. Plus, it's not so healthy for the animal when you're in a feedlot of 150,000 beef cows or something for too many months, and you're getting fed things that are kind of weird byproducts from food industry and stuff. You mentioned sugar. I remember a guy showing me a big bunker of Skittles, a candy. It's a little round candy in the United States, and I guess the factory produced them with something wasn't right about them, so they ended up in a feedlot. And so I mean, the more we can graze, and we can do that now because in the regenerative cropping on our large croplands, we find that when you integrate livestock in the rotation or to manage your cover crops, that gives a new feed source that's beneficial, so that we don't have to open up, we don't have to worry about expanding farmland. We can just better utilize the farmland and bring it back to health with those livestock, because those livestock do an important role of both eating or managing those cover crops, but also they help spread microbes. That's their, as they consume and move, they spread microbes, they spread seeds. That's how we're reversing desertification, especially in arid climates, is by using cows in the proper way to restore arid lands that have become desertified, which is going to be a huge help to the climate.
Well,
I mean, global climate thing has been about CO2 and emissions and all that. But really what we see the problems are hydrological cyclings, water cyclings, droughts and floods. And that needs to be solved by getting that soil back to health, getting the microbes back in the soil so it can infiltrate water, so it can respire water, so it can cool the soil surface. All those benefits to the ecosystem that actually can benefit globally.
Well, let me introduce our second guest is Dr. Kevin Folta. He is also a science communicator. He's a professor at the Horticultural Sciences Department at the University of Florida. And I'm sorry that we didn't get you on simultaneously. That was maybe our fault for not lining this up. But I want to make sure that you get a sense of, Ed here has been introducing us the concept of regenerative and sustainable agriculture, saying it's not exactly organic. There's a graded approach to the certifications, and that and Ed, maybe you can check me on this, is the ultimate goal of this practice the elimination of added nutrients and eliminating pesticides?
For the most, in many situations, we're finding that is possible. We have farms with thousands of acres that aren't needing those anymore, are getting great yields, are getting great nutrition in their products, saving a lot of money for the farmers, and a lot of benefits to it. Yeah. But again, it's not an extreme, black and white situation. We're not against anything that's used. If our sort of thing is, if you can find a way to not need something that's going to cost you money and you can find a way to do it without it, why not?
Okay, so it would be, in the majority approach, it would be to minimize the application of added nutrients and pesticides, and you're not in favor of an outright ban, but it is sort of the tendency for people advocating for this, that's saying we need to get back and get away from chemicals because it is destroying our soil health. Now, Kevin, what's your take on the sustainable agriculture movement? Is there any science in it, or do you sort of dispute that there's a scientific backing to this?
Well, I don't want to say that there's. Oh, first of all, sorry for being a few minutes late. We're in the middle of a thunderstorm, and I didn't have any power.
Oh, boy.
So I have
Oh,
it.
wow.
I have it technically for a little bit, so I'll speak quickly. I don't dispute in many of the claims that people make because their claims come from personal anecdotes and observations, and people claim whatever they claim from the system they're studying. The problem that I have is that there's very little published data that show actual efficacy of many of the strategies that are claimed. And I think that's where I get most concerned because there's not a one size fits all situation in any agricultural arena. And what works well in Iowa may not work well in Florida. Or it won't work well in Florida. We know that already. But so there's a lot of broad brush statements that are made, a lot of a tendency to push back away from anything that's not a natural compound being applied. We sell at farmers markets every Saturday, and people ask, well, how do you grow this? Is it organic? And I'll say, no, it's better than organic because we know the synthetic fertilizers we're applying and exactly what we're applying to the crop for the crop's need and what our land, but what's there naturally in our soil. And so we measure it, we supplement, and we do it with great precision. And it's synthetic. That's not allowed on many of these types of systems. But I feel is a much more sustainable approach than others might suggest.
Well, to counterpoint that, you're saying that that there are anecdotes, and I guess the plural of anecdote is not data, but to take a few studies that I have heard of independent of Ed, the Brant farm, which is not certified organic, so they do use synthetic materials to grow their crops. They're working towards reducing that the load added to their soils. Would you say that the Brant farm is in or out of consideration when it comes to supporting the regenerative use case?
Is that question for me or for Ed?
Let's start with you, Kevin. Do you think that a farm like the Brant farm, which will use synthetic additives, does that support your case, or does it support the regenerative agricultural case?
Well, I think it supports my case. I don't know this exact example. I'm not an expert on that particular area, and I follow when I see discussion of regenerative. I find that means many things to many different people, and that the single definition eludes many. So there's people who claim it's kind of just a way of rebranding organic for many folks, but I would see somebody using a strategy that works for them is perfectly fine for me. I don't care if it's synthetic or whatever or not. But I think the idea of identifying your particular problems, your crops or your livestock, looking at the situation in your soil and using whatever means to get there is what works. And so that's where I get I don't like the broad brush approach of this is everybody should be doing it organic. Well, it doesn't work for me. You can't grow organic peaches where I live. Cannot be done. We have to use insecticides, and it's just the way it goes. And there's nothing that we will ever do where I live to amend the soil or have animal grazing or whatever that will allow us to do it. It just and that many people have tried. It's just the physical nature of the case where we're in.
Well, let me follow up with Ed now, and I think Ed might be a little more familiar with this particular anecdote or case because it's in the David Montgomery stuff that we spoke about earlier. So, Ed, do you think that a farm that is reducing their synthetic additive load, is that supportive of your case, or is the existence of any synthetic additives a refutation of regenerative agriculture?
No, as I've said all along, it's a transition. It doesn't have to be extreme. We do have farmers. We have Rick Clark in Indiana who has 7,000 acres of crops, he is actually certified organic, but he's not using organic traditionally, because he's actually not using any pesticides or synthetic fertilizers at all. And yet, getting great yields, having great resilience, building his soil health, building his soil structure, especially building his economics. Because so many farmers right now, the cost of production is beyond, if they're in the commodity market, beyond what they're getting paid. So it's one way for the economics of farmers to be able to stay in business.
Okay. Let's get to Gabe's.
With Dave Brandt's farm. He was a real pioneer in the industry. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, he was tragically killed in an auto accident. His son's taken over the farm, but he did great field days. He's a real innovator in the industry, and so Dave was just a great guy.
Let me get to Gabe's question before I press both of you on this issue.
Yeah, actually, a couple of questions. Kevin, before you came, we were talking about the decrease in the quality of food, the nutritional quality of food over the decades. And I mean, does that synthetic thing, does that kind of cause that? And is another question I have concerning sustainability is, what about the runoff that causes dead zones in the ocean?
Yeah, so let me start with the first one. The first one is a real problem for me because if you're looking at nutrient quality of an individual food item, the total amount of nutrients in most cases has not changed, but the amount per gram has. And the reason why is because fruit are larger because of, fruit that consumers have demanded and breeders have responded with are larger. So people wanted bigger tomatoes, bigger strawberries, bigger everything. And breeders selected for larger ones, which have more water on board in the individual fruit. So the same amount of folate in that strawberry. It's just that less folate per gram. And I think that's the major driver for those claims. If you look across the board, there's no real good data to say that everything has lost its nutritional value across the board. One thing that we do know is that we do have better shelf life, we have better yields, we have better shippability. Maybe the quality isn't as good. Everybody knows the weird pink tomato that they stick on a Subway sandwich isn't as good as a garden-grown tomato. But in the process of commoditizing and coming up with large agriculture to feed more people fruits and vegetables at an affordable price, we've seen a decrease in the relative quality of individual items. But at the same time, more people have access to fresh fruits and vegetables than ever before, and at a reasonable price. So this is if there is some sort of change in quality or nutrition, it is compensated by the idea that food today is more likely to reach their final destination, and all the nutrients in the world are useless if they rot on the vine or aren't consumed. So in that regard, we're better off. To speak to the fertilizer runoff issue, that's certainly an issue. And when you look at the overuse of fertilizers or improper use of fertilizers, we've seen it firsthand with various stakeholders in some contexts where we've done the experiments and shown the data and said, well, you can use 1/3 the potassium or phosphorus that you're using and it would still be fine. And yet they still do what they've always done because that's what grandpa did. And so you have a hard time changing the way people do what they do in some cases.
I want to follow up on that. That's really interesting. So you're saying that, in academia, in the quote unquote agrichem industry, you're advising your customers to reduce the additive load they add to their farms. In many cases.
Well, scientists have done those experiments. They've gone out and shown that you can use less. And this is in response to different groups monitoring water quality in rivers or things like that, and different waterways, where they say we're seeing nutrient increase. And where scientists have said that you can cut back, you can save money it will cause less of a problem. You're going to take away the prying eyes that wish to report you for nutrient runoff. You can take that all away, but farmers are reluctant. Some farmers, I should say, some are very compliant. Some are reluctant to accept those new data and say, this is the way I always did it, and I'm not going to change now because I don't want to do the experiment. Well, yeah, well, we did it in academia. We did the experiment. Yeah, but that wasn't on my space, and it wasn't the way I do things. It just is one of those things that happens when you confront anybody with data and information that they find uncomfortable. So that's the problem we're up against.
So it sounds from a neutral perspective like you're more or less pushing in the same direction. Maybe you have a different vision of the final goal, but you both want to make farmers more efficient. You want to help them bring their products to market with greater profit margins for the farms, and you both are interested in the greater the greater ecology outside of the farm. The challenge that I'm getting from the regenerative agricultural folks is that there is supposedly a measurable difference in the overall soil quality. And Kevin, would you say that there is work in your area of academia on increasing soil health overall?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a lot of interest in that, and a lot of discussion of what soil health really means. And I grow. So I'm an academic scientist, but we also have a family farm space where we do livestock as well as fruits and vegetables consumer direct. So we sell at farmers markets and other ways every week, and do that essentially farming in sand. It's almost pure hydroponics. We don't have soil to build here. It's a sandy, lousy soil, but we fertigate. So we add our fertilizer and we add acid to well water to irrigate because that's the only way you can do it. At least, unless somebody figures out something else. But I always am excited to listen to folks like Ed and others who have other experiences, who claim they make a difference using different strategies. The problem I always have is that there are a lot of folks in the regenerative agriculture space who will say, well, you guys are doing it wrong. Here's how you do it. Okay, but show me the data and show me the publications and let's do the real experiment. Don't just tell me I'm doing it wrong. And a lot of that becomes ideological around the idea of natural versus synthetic, big ag versus little ag, all those artificial constructs that have given us problems in the past.
Chris, why don't we go to your question?
Yeah, I think question I think for both Kevin and Ed, but I'd like to start with Kevin quickly. How are there enough schools spread out among all the states? I'm aware of Iowa State University does a lot with soil quality and water quality studies and some hybrid work, but are there enough schools teaching young people or middle-aged people, or having outreach to the farmers locally in different states that can spread the message and help pass along the good information that you come across?
Well, sure. Iowa State was the first place I was when I was looking for schools to go to as a high school student, where I was amazed that they had a soil tilth laboratory right on campus. I thought, wow, who the heck studies soil tilth? Well, what is tilth? and it sticks in my brain. And we have a soil and water science department at University of Florida. Pretty much every large land grant has at least some focus on soil. And the question with soil for many different reasons. It's the question of soil health has become kind of a buzzword, but more about soil content, soil resilience, soil ability to percolate water, all the things that nutrient runoff, nutrient retention, all those things are what soil and water science or soil departments study. So everybody has an opportunity to study those things. It's kind of taken a turn in the last decade where we're starting to see more of an interest in soil microbiomes, other types of soil life, and how that does and doesn't support agricultural production.
Okay. And Ed, are there colleges and universities people can learn about I'm getting messing up the word. Learn about your style, or do they need to apprentice themselves to a farm to learn?
Presently, mostly it's on the farms or the farmers that are really experienced in this, and do consulting, do field days, those sort of things. More and more schools, because more and more students are wanting to understand soil. What is the difference between dirt and soil? What is soil health? What is soil structure? How does soil build structure so it will infiltrate water? What does the soil biome do to benefit the nutrition of the plant and the nutrition of the food? This is stuff that regenerative agriculture has been working on and doing the science of. One of the things, I've been hanging out with scientists and my land grant people since the late 60s. And back then, I had a lot of interest in a lot of us farmers doing innovative stuff. A lot of our university people worked with us directly. And if we had something interesting we were doing, they wanted to come out and see it and study it. A lot because of budgets, for many reasons, that just doesn't happen as much as it is. So, like Kevin says, where's the peer-to-peer, scientific journal paper studied work on all this? And we keep saying, that's really can't be the farmer's responsibility to do that. That needs to be the ag institutions to come out and see if we have something that's interesting and worth studying, do that studying, do the writing of it, get it into the journals, because that can't be the farmer's job. The farmer is the farmer, and he's always been an innovator. Any good farmer wakes up in the morning and how can I do something better? And they're working with, as Kevin even mentioned, with the context of our farm, in our community, on our soil, and our ecosystem. All those things. That's what the farmer works on. But we need to get the institutions not just saying, where is this peer-to-peer review to prove what you're doing? You got to come. We have open gate policies. And as I mentioned earlier, we means we're a decentralized science movement of farmers that help and work together. We share information from farmer to farmer. If it doesn't work on our farm, we're not going to continue the practice, because we are, the final. I mean, we can't just say to Mother Nature, just work with us, make this work, and the our banker is also going to say, you got to prove it in what you're netting and what you're producing, and all this sort of stuff has to happen. So we need to work together again. The institutions, that's where the land grant started. It was farmers in the 1840s that first had the idea of academia needs to be important to agriculture. And it can't just be an ivory tower one-way street. It needs to work directly with farmers as a two-way street to innovate and work out together and make it good for the people. And that that has disappeared a bit in a lot of these institutions. Some by, control of certain interests, and some by just, they're not getting the support from the federal government to do research for the people. And so, we have an open gate policy. We're all willing to share whatever information, whatever data we have, and come out and study it and prove whether it works or not.
Can I jump in on that?
Yeah, before this breaks down too much, though, I want to check on what I know, and I know there is a local school at the University of Washington. I've been watching some of these lectures for, since 2018, and I want to sort of challenge Kevin now. Have you gone through any of these, like David Montgomery's writings, the no-till movement, any of these practices, the studies around these, whether or not it means they're using less additive product, but in general, are you familiar with those studies?
Not intimately familiar with all those studies, so I don't want to speak outside of my expertise.
Okay.
But those are I know that there's been an increasing interest in these areas, and people have been doing some very nice work in these areas. People in my institution do. The big question for me, just as corollary to Ed's discussion, has been that we do have a very strong extension program, which is part of the land grant mission, and that it is the job of the university to study what farmers are seeing and to follow those observations. And maybe different states don't connect as well as farmers as they should, or maybe there are other interests, as Ed put it. But here, in my state, they are the hypothesis generators. We find on the farm this is working, so let's study it, and then see what we can learn from it.
Okay, and to get back to it, you said that it's not in your area of expertise, and of course your area is because you're talking about hydroponics. Your attitude is that, well, we have a chemical understanding of the soil, and we can control that from the base level up. Is there any credence to the hypothesis that there is novel science to be discovered in soil chemistry? I forget the term. David used it as well, but there's phytochemicals and other compounds that are added and exchanged from plant to soil and from a multitude of interacting different crop species. Is there a hypothesis there that you could find supporting data in, and where are you going to look next, or is that also out of your area of expertise?
No, so my area of expertise, I'm a molecular biologist, and I also farm with my wife, but I'm a molecular biologist first, and I've studied for a long time how genetics of plants influence the situation, and that's really my bread and butter. But I've observed the concept of regenerative agriculture for a long time, and how what has been organic agriculture and organic production, and I know many organic producers who do a great job of how the concepts that have been there have kind of shifted towards regenerative, mostly because organic we've identified the shortcomings in pure organic production. And so it kind of has changed its face a little bit to something to kind of rebrand what organic was. And so that's what I've always observed. I believe that there are more things to discover. Absolutely. If I didn't, I'd go home. I would quit my job. There's many more things to discover. But I think what we're going to see in the next round of agricultural innovation is more precision agriculture based upon the specific needs of crops plus what's available in the soil. Those two things together, and specific the genetics in a given context, and that those two things will be understood with more resolution, with positive outcomes for farmers and for consumers,
okay,
and the environment.
I want to find a challenging question for Ed. Ed, when it comes to precision agriculture and the introduction of engineered food products, engineered seeds and genomes, do you think that those are detrimental to the regenerative case, or is regenerative agriculture going to be collaborative with engineered food products?
Well, we're very much into precision chemistry, but we're also bringing in the microbiology. So we want to maximize the soil microbiome and the symbiotic relationship to the plant to provide as much, instead of the old way of waiting for dirt to weather to release nutrients, we can use microbiology to speed up that process and its symbiotic relationship with the plants. I mean, we just in recent times discovered rhizophagy cycling, which is the ability to a plant to absorb whole bacteria and gain major nutrients from it. In fact, even nitrogen from most any plant can be attained that way. So, and then what we do is we realize that some of our sand, silt, and clay may be deficient of selenium or whatever. Often it's the lack of microbes, the right microbes, to be able to basically mine and deliver the needed nutrients to the plant. So that's where we gain a lot from building that microbes. But we realize, there's some soils which is the sand, silt, and clay, that may be lacking in something, or we don't have enough of the microbes, or weather condition limited their ability. So what we're doing is monitoring all the levels of everything that plant needs during its entire life from when the seed is dropped, so that then we can get the right, it might need some boron, might need some zinc, might need some manganese, and that's going to help the plant be healthy. It's going to help it be resilient. And it might just be a plant foliar application that's needed. So, and that's what I mentioned earlier, there's a new sensor coming out to be able to measure that in the field. And so we're very much into the chemistry, but we want that biology to support the chemistry, especially for the benefit of the farmer, and to build structure. Without that microbiology, what we found was, and that's what David Montgomery talks about a lot, we lost the structure in our soil. So it became compacted, it couldn't infiltrate water anymore, didn't have the aggregation, couldn't get oxygen in to feed for those microbes that need it, couldn't get nitrogen in the soil from the atmosphere for the microbes that can convert it and the plant that convert it within the rhizophagy cycling. So we're all into the science. Our focus, I guess, is stronger on the microbiology. And even that was the failure of organic. It didn't, of traditional organic. It still did too much tillage, still used too many things that harmed the biome. And it was more conventional with just a shift in different chemicals. And both Kevin and I probably would agree that some of those organic chemicals aren't safe either. I mean, use the coppers and stuff that get into our water system, and there's problems. So that's why our focus is more on health, and we find that the biome of the soil is what gives the plant health, gives it better nutrition, and gives it better resilience, and saves the farmer a lot of money.
And I really want to cycle back, Ed, to the question of are genetically engineered crops, an engineered genome, is that supportive or is that detrimental to regenerative agriculture?
In recent times, we're looking a lot more at epigenetics.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, taking a landrace variety and adapting it to our soil and our environmental conditions, and being able to measure like the biome in that seed, the nutrition in the seed, because we found over the last 20 or 30 years, a lot of our seeds just don't have the nutrition they used to have, don't have the biome they used to have. And so when they germinate, they're not starting out as healthy as they could. And when that seedling starts out and it's not healthy, we find it has much more problems with pathogens later in its life. So the healthier start we can get in getting those seeds back into nutrition and getting them more localized benefits the farmer. And then whether or not we could do some genetic engineering in it at that point, it becomes a different story of the type of genetic engineering that would work within that system. Because a lot of the work we found works great if you're in that sort of dirt chemical system, monoculture system. But when you change the system and the practices in a lot of ways, then what is the genetic ability that you don't have, that can be improved? And again, looking at just at the epigenetics too, and not just the genetics.
So I want to sort of get back to this. Are you saying that, it is your primary focus to address those epigenetic concerns, and it's you're just not going to sort of address like the benefits of something like winter wheat or advanced products that might have they might spoil slower, they might be more durable in transport, and that's the kind of thing that I think Kevin pointed out, is that that has a direct impact on nutrition sometimes.
Actually, we find like durability and density of the fruit, of the produce, often is a nutritional problem. That when we get the proper nutrition, especially, at the later stage of the plant, we can firm up and we end up with significant advantages in shelf life. It's just something that, it's been really looking deeply into the soil microbiome and the plant microbiome, and at that level just hasn't been done until really, and the ability to do it in the last 10 or so years with metagenomics and all this sort of thing that the farmer now has access to really look at things differently and what those outcomes could be. And that's where, again, if we could connect more with the people, in academia doing research in the labs and everything, I think it would be beneficial for farmers and
Okay.
for consumers.
I'll let Chris go ahead with his question.
Yeah, well, we're getting close to the end now, so I'm hoping for just a really short 15, 20-second answer from both. I've noticed in my Iowa headlines, John Deere has been laying off and closing a facility or two because there just isn't financial support in the agricultural areas. Yeah, are we in a agricultural recession, Ed, at the moment, or do you feel that this is or not?
Well, I think that gets really complicated. There's trade deals, there's issues in the commodity market. There's issues with, like in livestock, there's four major packers that control, the processing of meat. We don't have country of origin. It can say product of the USA, but it could be beef that's raised in other parts of the world, and the consumer doesn't realize that. Maybe a little bit too much consolidation in the supermarkets, not enough regional processing. So it puts a lot of farmers that could produce, Kevin sells at a farmer's market, but, and those have been great, but they're not, if all you have is either a supermarket or a farmer's market, there's probably a potential to be a lot in between that we've lost. And that's what, and that's kind of the good thing about the internet now. A lot of farmers can work together, can set up cooperatives, can direct market, can fill some of these more to sort of in between gaps in the system. So there's a lot of systems change that needs to happen, and especially globally too.
I wanna one more.
Sure. So, Kevin,
okay.
how about?
Go ahead. Yeah,
Well, not much that I can add to that, other than that farmers are not getting rich. There's more and more costs. There's many costs are prohibitive. The cost of new equipment, the cost of repairs, that no one's getting more money for their commodities, but the costs of doing it are getting higher. And that's a generalization across the board.
Okay.
I don't think we could do justice to this subject as eco-modernists without at least mentioning the BT eggplant. Ed, what is your observation of eggplants in Bangladesh, considering that adding a GMO product reduced the use of pesticides by about 40% and increased crop yields?
I think because they were, it's how they had been farming, the conditions of their soils, all that, that's where GMOs work really good when you're within that farming system that has been pretty much dirt oriented, without considering the soil health, the microbiome, whether that soil's been protected, the infiltration, the soil structure, all that sort of thing. It's very beneficial in those systems. And it's done a lot. Over history, there's been innovations from Norman Borlaug on that have been great innovations, but science advances, and that's the whole thing. Science needs to continue to advance. So what's good for now is one thing, but what do we need to go into the future, especially to sustain and all the implications of getting this ability, getting the seeds, getting the whatever. How will that work in the future? What's the sustainability of their soil? They have other problems, droughts, floods. It's much more complicated than just one part of it.
So would you be in favor of a phased ban on synthetic additives and GMO plant products?
I'm not into bans of anything.
Okay.
I mean, if there's a serious health that really gets determined instead of just questionable, I'm not into banning. I mean, that doesn't really help the farmer in their situation. I don't know, I guess I could say it's kind of like if you're an addict into something, cold turkey can sometimes be really harmful. So I'm not into that, but I'm into, let's look at all the different ways we can help these farmers all over the world, and let's not just say there's only one thing and hold on to the status quo and whatever, we need to keep advancing science, and that's more important to me.
Well, thank you so much, Ed. Kevin, you have any closing thoughts? And then I'll give it over to Ed for his closing thought. Anything each of you would like to promote in these closing statements is just fine with us.
No, I appreciate it. I think the trick with regenerative and sustainable agriculture is really the goal of what we're working on. And the BT example is a beautiful one. That's the one I was hoping to mention earlier. Here's an example of a genetic engineering trick that allows for more sustainable agriculture and fewer inputs by far. And if that's not the definition of sustainability, then I don't know what is. And it's a genetic solution. And the eggplant is a great example. The fact that that has been so vigorously opposed by some personalities in the regenerative space really speaks a lot. So that's the future is all tools on the table, and it's the best of understanding what's happening in regenerative space, what's happening in genetic engineering, and it's about getting those tools together fast through regulatory hoops if necessary, and getting them into the hands of farmers fast, and relying on data more than anecdotes, having better science communication and opportunities to share those stories. And I host the Talking Biotech podcast every week, usually at talkingbiotech.com. And I'm on most social medias at Kevin Folta. So that's me.
Great. And Ed, absolutely. Thank you for being here. Anything you'd like to respond to, add to the conversation, or promote in your closing statements?
Yeah, I think regenerative, there are people out there that are spokespeople, have their own, aren't really the farmers really doing the work, really doing the science. And they're the ones that aren't getting listened to. And there's a lot of people that talk whatever in all kinds of phases of our life that, are just doing it to talk and to get interest and all that kind of thing, but it's not necessarily all that beneficial. And then they get picked on because they don't sound right, and of course they don't really know so what's really happening, and I think that hurts all of it. It's on both sides. There's some good things that all people working on agriculture have done, and there's some things that need to be improved. And so I don't, again, I'm not into banning. I'm not into saying, oh, all that stuff is wrong or anything like that. Let's just keep working and try to find the best ideas that can work. And we need multiple ideas because some farmers are going to want to do it some way. Some consumers are going to want it one way. As long as it works, as long as it's productive, as long as it doesn't cause major harm, that's the variety I think that we need to have. But we need to be open about it all.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions. This has been the Eco-Modernist Channel Live. We broadcast right here on YouTube every Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. You can find us on the web at ESNA.earth. That's ESNA.earth. Please support us on patreon.com at the Eco-Modernist Channel. You can also find us on Facebook at the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. And we rebroadcast many places on my personal accounts. I'm Carl Alex Pauls. You can find us on my LinkedIn, on my X.com account, and on my personal Twitch That's Soyatl or soyatl.tv. And so remember, emissions first, peace and justice will follow.
I want to speak to you about a new organization called the Eco-Modernist Society of North America. I'm here because we are in the midst of a potentially monumental ecological crisis. It is only through a new environmentalism 2.0 that progress can be made. We believe that our only hope for human advancement and even human survival is through the exponential advance of science in the service of humanity. Eco-modernism is a new environmental paradigm which looks to reverse the fear of nuclear power and scientific progress in general. Ecology-based modernism is the most direct way to define it. Eco-modernism as a philosophy is described in the Eco-Modernist Manifesto. We believe humanity should not be rejecting technological progress, but rather separate our impacts from nature through the responsible use of technology and urbanization. Urbanization is an unstoppable worldwide trend and the best solution to many environmental problems. It offers sustainable development for the human population and is a historic antidote to both deforestation and species extinction as humans move away from using wildlife as their protein source. Vertical, urban, high-rise architecture minimizes the use of land, resources, and energy, enabling walkable cities that facilitates the more efficient use of mass public transit as well. It must be emphasized that our support for technological solutions is definitely not about defending industrial polluters, nor does our defense of technology imply that we just need to sit back and let things take care of themselves. To the contrary, we believe that humanity is at a crossroads that severely threatens our future on this planet. I hope by now you understand the worthiness of our cause. Eco-modernism is really only a philosophy at this time. I want to talk to you about the necessity of turning it into a movement, which will be part of the larger environmentalist movement. For it is only through our presence and participation that there can be any hope of moving environmentalism in the right direction. Our aim is not to divide the environmental movement, but rather to multiply its numbers with the incorporation of many scientific and educational communities that is working to both build chapters of eco-modernist societies and support our growth worldwide.